The water crushes him. Not the cold, crushing weight of the sea we know, but a thick, gory soup that tastes of copper and old death. Beowulf is drowning. He is 50 fathoms down, lungs burning like a stoked furnace, and he is not alone. They are on him, the Nicors, strange, worm-like sea dragons that writhe in the dark, snapping at his mail shirt with tusks that can shear through bone. He kicks, fighting the pressure, fighting the urge to gasp in this liquid hell. But a shadow deadlier than the serpent's rises from the silt. She is here, the wolf of the deep. She does not swim. She darts like a spear thrown by a giant. Her claws, hard as iron grappling hooks, seize his shoulder, pinning his arms to his sides. He cannot draw his sword. He cannot breathe. He is being dragged down into the abyss, further than any man has gone and lived. In this suffocating darkness, the hero of Geatland must answer one question. When human breath fails and human iron shatters, what is left to stave off the dark? To understand the water, we must understand the blood that led him there. Only last night, Heorot Hall rang with laughter. The monster Grendel was dead, his arm torn from the socket, pinned high on the rafters like a trophy of the hunt. The Danes slept the heavy sleep of men who believe the war is over. But peace in the north is a fragile shield. The feud-law, the ancient code of wergild, demands payment. If a kinsman falls, blood must answer blood. Grendel was an outcast, an enemy of God, yet he had a mother, and a mother's grief, twisted by the curse of Cain, is a terrible engine of war. She came in silence. She did not batter the doors like her son. She slipped in like a mist. Panic seized the hall. In the chaos, she took only one thing, not gold, not the king himself, but Aesir. Aesir, the old grey-haired counselor, Hrothgar's shoulder comrade in the shield wall, the mind that guided the king's sword. When Beowulf awoke and arrived, the deed was done. The victory was ash. Hrothgar, the old king, wept not just for a friend, but for the renewed horror. "Dead is Aesir," he groaned. The joy of the morning was strangled in its crib. Beowulf did not weep. He looked at the trembling king and spoke words that cut through the gloom like a knife. "Sorrow not, wise warrior. It is better for a man to avenge his friend than to mourn overmuch." He made a choice then. He would not wait for the monster to come again. He would hunt the hunter. He would invade the other world. The trail was easy to follow. It was written in red across the moorland. A track of dragging limbs and spattered gore led through the joyless wood. The trees here were twisted, their roots clinging to the earth like gnarled fingers, leaning over stones grey with the frost of ages. And then they saw it, the cliff edge. Below, the water churned, boiling with blood, hot and foul. And there, placed on the headland like a boundary marker, was the head of Aesir. It was a warning, a grim signpost marking the edge of the human world. Beyond this cliff, the law of men ended, and the dominion of monsters began. The Danes gazed at the severed head of their wise friend, and despair seized them. The grief was a physical blow. But Beowulf stood at the precipice. He watched the water. He saw the wake of serpents, the Nicors sunning themselves on the rocks, creatures of nightmare, half wolf, half reptile, who hunt the whale road. He lifted his war horn and blew a blast that sang of defiance. The note rang out, a battle song bold, and the creatures dove, terrified by the sound of human order. Beowulf began to arm. This was a ritual, a funeral rite for the living. He donned his war net, the hand-linked chainmail that had weathered the grinding of spears. It sat heavy on his shoulders, a cage of steel to hold his life inside. On his head, the boar-crested helmet, beaten by smiths to deflect the bite of swords. Then, Unferth stepped forward. Unferth, the king's orator, who had mocked Beowulf's swimming match with Breca, who had doubted his strength. Now, humbled by the horror of the mere, he offered his own sword, Hrunting. It was an heirloom, an iron blade etched with ill-boding patterns tempered in blood. It had never failed a hand that lifted it in battle. By taking it, Beowulf accepted the trust of the Danes. Beowulf looked at Hrothgar. "If I go for your need and lose my life," he said, his voice steady as the stones, "be a protector to my thanes, and send the gold you gave me to Hygelac, my king." It was a butte, a formal boast, a contract with fate. He did not wait for a blessing. He did not look back at the sun. The Lord of the Geats leaped from the cliff. The water rose up to swallow him. The silence is instant. The roar of the wind, the cry of the gulls, the weeping of the Danes, all vanished, replaced by the thrumming pressure of the deep. The text tells us it was Hwyl Daiges, the space of a day, before he saw the bottom. A temporal impossibility for a mortal man, but this is not a mortal swim. Beowulf is descending into time itself, sinking into a prehistoric silence. He is alone. The isolation is absolute. Every stroke takes him further from the light of Christ and closer to the chaotic dark. She is waiting. She, who has guarded this flood hall for 100 half-years, perceives him. She strikes. The ambush is sudden. She wraps him in horrible chains, her limbs locking around him. The Nicors swarm in, tearing at his mail shirt. He is a plaything in the grip of the deep. She drags him down until they breach a threshold. Suddenly, the water is gone. He hits the floor of a cave, a hostile hall where the water is held back by walls of rock. A strange, fiery glow illuminates the cavern. Beowulf scrambles to his feet and swings Hrunting. The ancient sword sings through the air, aimed at her head. Clang. The sound is wrong. It is not the wet tear of flesh, but the dull ring of failure. The blade turns on her hide. Hrunting refuses to bite. Beowulf flings the useless steel to the ground and lunges with his bare hands. They grapple, a tangle of limbs and fury. He throws her down, but she is deceptive, fluid as the water she rules. In a moment, the tables turn. She trips him. He falls. She draws a knife, a broad, gleaming seeks. She stabs. The blade comes down, driving for the heart. The steel halts. The braided breastnet, the chainmail shirt holds. God and the smith's hammer save him in that split second. But he is pinned. His eyes dart frantically around the hall, and there he sees it. Hanging on the wall, a sword. Not of men, but of giants. Larger than any human weapon. Beowulf surges upward, seizes the hilt, and swings. The blade bites through the neck bone. The mother falls. Silence returns to the hall. As the head rolls away, a brilliance fills the cave. The light grows, radiant and pure. The evil is dead. Beowulf finds the corpse of Grendel and strikes off his head. But the metal screams. The blood of the beast is so hot, so venomous, that the blade of the giant's sword begins to melt. It dissolves like ice, leaving Beowulf holding only the golden hilt etched with runes of the ancient flood. He has the hilt, he has Grendel's head. It is enough. He swims up. Above, on the cliff, the Danes have left, assuming the worst. But the Geats stayed, sick at heart. Then the surface broke. Not a corpse, but a king. Beowulf erupted from the water, gasping the sweet air of the living world. The water was calm now, cleansed of the Nicors. He dragged a burden with him. He swam to shore. Grendel's head was so heavy, it took 4 seasoned warriors to impale it on a spear and carry it between them. They marched back to Heorot with the thunder of victory. They entered the hall where the Danes sat drinking. With a heave, his men dumped the head onto the planks. Thud. The hall went silent. Beowulf stood before Hrothgar, wet, battered, holding the golden hilt. He simply pointed to the head. The debt was paid. History remembers Beowulf for the strength of his grip. But in the trial of the Mere, he learned that strength alone is not enough. He learned that human weapons fail, and that to kill the root of evil, one must be willing to descend into the abyss and trust that when the iron breaks, fate will offer a handle if you have the courage to grasp it. The monsters are gone, but fate is a wheel that never stops turning. Walk with us through the old stories. Subscribe to Saga Weaver, where ancient warriors face impossible choices.